Hi guys. Hello everyone. I hope you can see me. I hope you can hear me well. Today I have Tom with me from Antler Studios. Hello Tom.
Hello, hello. Good to
How,
see everyone.
how are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. How are you?
I'm amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so
Very
much.
good.
Games careers week, so it's a big week for anyone who's trying to make it in the industry. And within the stream, we're gonna sort of focus on your story, how you got into the industry. Was it whether it was difficult to get into, how you got your funding, etc., etc. So maybe you can start with your background.
Yeah, well, I'll start with a quick sort of who I am and what we are, because I feel more like an entity than a person when I'm part of Antler Studios. So we're a small team of four, currently working on our first major project called Project Grove. We did Tranzfuser back in 2018, which was our first thing we did outside of university. We started as a university team, working on our dissertation in our final year, went into Tranzfuser, and then went into starting a studio straight after that. We unfortunately didn't win Transfuser, but it was a lot of fun, and we actually learned so much along the way doing that.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, since then we went on to run a Kickstarter, which gained us over 30K funding. We've done various other funding runs with other sources, but I'll go into more detail in that later. And yes, we're now a self-supported indie studio. Yeah, that's sort of
That's
where I'm at the moment.
That's great. The most like encouraging part of what you just said, I find, is the fact that although you haven't won the transfer, you still, I feel like you still gained enough out of it to go ahead and create the studio to start it up.
Yeah,
Am I right in saying that?
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
It was a really interesting experience because it was the first time we had sort of a period of time where we were all working full time on the game. Because before we always had, other sections of university. We had social lives. We still have social lives, but not really. Um, but we had, other things going on because we were at university and we were, doing all that sort of stuff. Whereas Transfuser gave us a period where we could actually work as a commercial studio, and
Mhm.
that was really interesting. And we learned a lot doing that sort of full time self employment,
Yeah,
which is really interesting.
I see. I see. So was the currently you are working on a Project Groove. This is the, I suppose, the main game you are looking to publish one day sometime.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Was
Sometime
the
soon, hopefully.
sometime soon, hopefully. Was there anything before that, or did you stick with that project when you started as a team back in the university?
So at university, we started and we developed a bunch of small prototypes and sort of concepts. Um, but Project Grove is the first one we landed our hearts on, and we have been sticking with it for the past 2.5 years.
Mhm.
Um, and it's been really exciting because it's very different to how we initially imagined it. There's sort of one or two things that are still very consistent. There's still some mechanics that are very consistent to the
Mhm.
original concept, but when you develop something this scale for the first time, there's always things that change, and that's okay. It's fine to go, "Nah, that doesn't work. We need to change that." It's okay to change things. You don't have to have a perfect concept and follow it
Yeah.
through perfectly to the end.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's of course projects like video games, and the larger the scope, the more it's true that it evolves, it changes. Although you might have a set plan in mind for what the game is
hmm,
gonna be, you learn about it, and it sort of evolves into its own thing, its own identity. I feel over time, right? Um,
definitely.
yeah. So Project Groove. How
Mhm.
was it like to start working on it as a well, you told the team, okay, we're gonna try to publish it. Uh, what was it like approaching the project? Did you have to scope up, scope down? In terms of like technicality of the project, was there a lot of
Yeah,
learning involved?
mhm.
If you can take me through like the hill that you had to climb in order to
Yeah,
speed up the development, get the
yeah,
momentum of the development.
definitely. So as I think anyone who's tried designing a game for the first time, um, and I've seen it in students that I've taught at university as well, is that it's always too big to start with. It's always too There's always too many features. It's
Yeah.
too long and there's too many mechanics. So we definitely weren't scoping up. We were definitely scoping down. Um, but I think what's important is to learn how to figure out what is the core of your game, what is the minimum product that still
Mhm,
resembles what you want. I think that's a skill in itself, is figuring out what is actually key to the game.
mhm,
And it's a skill that we definitely didn't have straight away. We went through various iterations of focusing on different bits of the game, jumping between different elements, going, no, this is the most important, no, this is the most important. And it took us time to figure out, okay, what in our game do we actually care about, and what do players care about? And you only really find that through trial and error and testing.
Mhm.
Um, and after you've done it for a while, you've kind of figured it out. So now when new features pop up, we can quite easily go, is this actually important to the experience? Yes or no. So should we do it or not? Should we put the
Mhm.
time in? And it's just a skill you have to generate, and you only generate it by making stuff and trying stuff out, and getting other people to play it. Don't hide your games away in little closets and cupboards. Let people play it. Let your friends play it. If you have Discord servers you're part of, let them play it. If you've got a YouTube channel, let your viewers play it. It always really helps with the shaping of the game and what's actually going to be
Mhm.
fun about it.
Mhm. So in terms of before you got to the veteran stage of understanding how to shape a game and
Yeah.
mold it into a great looking sculpt, let's say, what were you able to take out of Transfuser when you went through it? You said you were unsuccessful. What did you take out of it that helped you move forward? You know.
Yeah. So I think the big things that we took out of it is we improved our team dynamic a lot and our work ethic a lot. At university, we kind of all just worked when we wanted to work and worked on the bits of the game we enjoyed.
Mhm.
Because that's what you do when you start. When you start, you want to make the things that you like.
Yeah.
And so I think some things that are really important to think about is to take yourself seriously.
Mhm.
Even if you're fresh out of university or in your last year of university, trying to make a game as a team, treat yourselves like a studio. Set yourself work hours. Set yourself, I'm going to do this many hours of work this week. So I'm going to need to schedule that into a calendar, and my team can see that calendar and they can message me when I'm working, and I am working. Treat yourselves like an actual studio. The next thing is trust and leadership. At the beginning, we were all very much, we each have to have our own voices. We each have to be heard. We have to make
Yeah.
sure that everyone's opinions are heard. And
Mhm.
whilst it's very important for everyone's opinions to be heard, you need to have trust in someone else's ability to make the decision.
Mhm.
So every decision can't have everyone discussing it. So if you've got a lead designer and a lead programmer, if it's something technical, let the lead programmer just take lead on it and just decide whether it should go in or not. If
Mhm.
it's a design decision, let your lead designer be the one that makes that decision. Don't let other people get in and dilute conversations. Make sure that you have decisive decisions, and that stuff is actually trusted and you trust your teammates. And that's an important part of team dynamics that I think we really developed over the Tranzfuser period when we were able to work every day together in a group.
I see. I think that's actually a great advice because I can imagine in terms of a pipeline, um, if you have four people trying to steer a ship, it's not going to move anywhere. It's going to stay
No,
in place. It's like you put an anchor
no.
down. So this sort of analogy can maybe put into perspective for people who aren't in the gaming industry how
Yeah.
crucial it is to make sure everyone is heading in the same direction with a project.
Mhm.
So I think that's great advice, Tom. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. Um, yeah, great. So Project Roof, I'm sure viewers already noticed. I've been playing here and there some GIFs of your game. Let's talk a bit more specific about your project, about Project
Yeah.
Groove,
Sure.
which went from a uni project to a industry project.
Yeah.
If you can take me
Um,
through that, I'll play a bit of a. There is a platforming clip. Maybe let's start
mhm.
with the platforming and what's the small robot because I feel like that's the
Yeah.
core of your game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, with all good indie games, there's always one core mechanic that is strong and that carries the game. And for us, that's our robot companion Elpin. Our game is a puzzle platformer, so there's a lot of moving around the world. And so we wanted to have something that we'd be doing all the time. So we've created Elpin, who is a single platform that you can place anywhere out in your 3D world. This allows people to explore and be creative with how they solve solutions and get around the world. We wanted an open world feeling. And if anyone else is looking to make games, open world is something I see a lot in new developers and new designers. I would not recommend anyone to do open world. It's a especially as your first project. It's a really exciting place to work, but it's so much dev time and it's so much work. And if I could go back and change one thing, I would use all of our mechanics and our ideas and try and make something that's a bit more concise. Because we did get there eventually, and the open world feeling is there and it works now.
Yeah.
But that's only after 2 years of tinkering and fiddling with it. And so I would suggest that if you're getting into making a new game, your first game, don't try and avoid those buzzwords like exploration and open world. Think about, okay, how can I make a concise game that really fulfills a fantasy or fulfills a sort of player type's
Mhm.
dreams of playing a game.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with that. Your game is beautiful, by the way. It's looking great. I see you went for the
Thanks.
more stylized look.
Hmm.
I'm very much biased in saying that it looks amazing, but yeah, huge fan of that. Looks great. So I suppose from what you just described, you didn't,
Hmm.
despite scoping down, you didn't scope down on the world size. You are still aiming for the
We did scope down to a certain extent, but it wasn't
certain
it
extent.
wasn't a
Okay.
place that we were willing to completely scope down.
Hmm.
Um, in terms of the world design asset creation process, it's a process that is very technical. It was one of those hard skills that at university you kind of get an idea of, but you don't start to learn it properly until you start doing it, and doing it on a larger scale. And so having people on your team that are always looking to learn new things and wanting to learn how to do things properly in the right way,
Hmm.
um, is a really important thing to look for when you're looking for good teammates. If you want to start a team, look for people who always want to learn new stuff, because even if they don't have the skill now, they'll have it in a month, once they've learned how to do it. So hard skills are something that it whilst it's good to always be learning and having those hard skills, it's not something that you should be stressing over not knowing some hard skills, because you'll learn them really quickly
Hmm.
as soon as you have to put them into action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I think we learn every day, especially in the gaming industry. It's a ever evolving thing. So,
Yeah.
like when we started our conversation, we mentioned how the project just evolves over time, right? So,
Hmm.
you will have to learn things that come up and sort of work around it, find new ways of tackling the problems, right? So, since you didn't scope down on the world, it's still a big game. It's a big project to create, right?
Yeah.
Where did the funding come from? If not the Transfuser, how did you
Yeah.
manage to sustain yourself as a studio? You mentioned being serious about it. So, in
Hmm.
terms of like really tackling it as a proper studio, where did the income come from for the studio? How did you manage to stay afloat, sort of, as a team?
Yeah, so there's various things that we did that I think were key to us being able to continue the
Hmm.
project. Because at some point, you can't keep just not working for any money, and you can't keep sustaining yourself off, you know, all these secondary income
Yeah.
sources. So the first thing we did to ask ourselves was, are we all committed to this as a project? And because before you start asking, friends and family, Kickstarter, any of these sort of crowdfunding, even a publisher, before you start asking outside sources for money, you need to think, are we committed to this? Is this what we really
Hmm.
want to do? Um, and so for us, it started with rounds of friends and family, just being able to support us whilst we created pitch decks, started thinking about Kickstarter, started
Hmm.
getting other income sources. Most of us have also worked part time at some point on other jobs, just so we can afford rent and that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. Um, because your first game, it's not gonna generate revenue until it's released, and our first game still isn't released. So the game itself isn't earning any revenue.
Hmm.
Um, for us, the big stage was Kickstarter. We decided to
Okay.
do it. Um, we ended up getting over 30K from Kickstarter, which was amazing.
That's
Um,
huge.
and on top of that, we also got our first sort of round of fans and people that want to learn about the game and talk to us about the game and play it. And that was, in many senses, more exciting than the money, although the money was quite exciting. Um, so that's sort of the main ways we've got money. The other way, we've done some sort of programs and various sort of uh, I don't know what to call them, sort of similar to Tranzfuser, but different in terms of not you taking university students, but more industry focused.
Hmm.
Um, we did one called Elevate that was a small program that champions diverse studios, which we're really proud to be. And so that was really fun and interesting. It put us in touch with a lot of mentors, and gave us, similar to Transfuse, it gave us time to develop stuff and do more things.
Hmm.
But generally for us, the main source of income in terms of supporting us was Kickstarter, um, which I think a lot of people think is a very good way and easy way to get money for a game, but it is really tough, and it was really hard getting that money.
Hmm.
And Kickstarter is definitely not something to take lightly. Um, but
Absolutely.
I can talk more about that if we're interested.
Hmm. maybe some tips, I suppose, for people who
Hmm.
are looking to um, go into the industry. Let's say someone was unsuccessful, but they have a project, unsuccessful to gain funding through a form of competition like Tranzfuser,
Yeah.
um, and they're still looking to break into the industry and they want to
Hmm.
set up that Kickstarter. What would you say are like the few key tips
Yeah.
to bear in mind when you're going into it? Does a team need to prepare? What are the
Hmm.
obligations? What
Yeah.
do they need to bear in mind before they actually decide to go through with the truth? And because I
Yeah.
feel like what you mentioned is very important, how the community, the response from community and gaining fans was really exciting. But when you are putting your project out there, it's important to make a good first impression, right? You want people to get
Yeah.
excited because that boosts the team morale. And like you said, although the money was exciting, seeing people enjoying your game, that's what you
Yeah.
want, right? Essentially,
Exactly.
that's what's gonna bring profit, anyways, right?
Yeah. So, my top tips for Kickstarter is, well, first is a caveat that it is a lot of work. You can't just put up a Kickstarter page and expect people to come to it.
Yeah.
There's, when we were running our Kickstarter, we spent 2 months prior preparing everything. And then for the month of the Kickstarter, none of us scheduled any work on the game. We were just doing Kickstarter for the month.
Wow. Okay.
So it is a big time commitment. But in terms of making your content and thinking about it, the keys are have something playable, have something
Hmm.
that's fun to play. Because if a player sees a bit of art that they can get invested in, that's great. But if they can play something and something's interactive, that's going to get them much more invested much more quickly. Um, don't try and do a Kickstarter on a concept alone. You got to
Yeah.
have content to show. You got to show that you've actually
Absolutely.
put the work in. Um, those are my sort of top tips. But in terms of obligations and how to go about it, there's lots of good reading material and guides on crowdfunding in general.
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of good examples of it being done really well. Um, and often the case is you can message people that have done it well. For example, we had a good relationship with Everspace and the Everspace 2 team, and they had a really successful round of funding on Kickstarter, 2 rounds.
Hmm.
And we talked to them a lot about how they did it and how we should do it. And often, if you just message these people and be earnest, they'll reply and they'll help. So asking people, that's a really good way to just learn about this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys learned like quite a lot from one another
Hmm.
in terms of that. So you mentioned that Kickstarter probably requires research from what I'm hearing. You need to know what you're getting
Yeah.
yourself into.
Yeah.
So research is part of learning, and when it comes to learning, what do you feel like? What does a person need to go into the game industry?
Mhm.
What are the technical skills? Like realistically, what do you need to know? What do you need to understand before you actually go ahead and say, "I'm gonna make a game," right? Um,
Yeah.
so not being like a daydreaming person, what do you need
Mhm.
to grasp and understand before you can actually go into it?
So I'm going to talk about this from two angles. First, I'm going to talk about in general getting into the games industry, and then I'll talk about our hiring process and sort of things we look for.
Yeah.
Um, so in terms of generally getting into the game industry, the most important thing to have is enthusiasm. If you're enthusiastic and ask people and are always trying to do something better than you did before,
Hmm.
um, that's going to come across really quickly. People that are all talk and don't actually make anything or do anything, um, they lose their contacts very quickly,
Hmm.
and they don't interest people. So you've got to show that you're invested in making stuff. So enthusiasm, one thing. The next thing is make some stuff. Um, to some extent, that's following tutorials and learning some hard skills. Maybe you learn to code. Maybe you go into asset creation. Um, but really, you just want to open up some free software, Unreal, Unity, Game Maker, even, and just make some games. They can be the simplest match three game in the world, or you could do a first person combat system. It doesn't have to be a full game. It can just be
Hmm.
some things. It's building out a diverse portfolio, showing that you're willing to learn, showing that you're willing to try stuff out, showing that you're committed to making games.
Yeah.
In terms of applying to smaller studios like ours, so our sort of recruiting process, um, the sort of key things are having a strong portfolio, and that doesn't mean that you have the greatest art or the most beautiful design or the most elegant code. it's about showing that you can do lots of stuff and that you're willing to learn to do stuff and that you're always trying to push the boundaries. Um, because any hard skill, like I said, can be learnt pretty quickly when you have to do it every day
Hmm.
for a week. Um, so it's more about showing that you have the enthusiasm to learn and um, the interest in making new stuff. In terms of personality, like we get asked, "Oh, what sort of people do you want in your company all the time?" And there's not really a personality other than the kind of person who isn't going to be horrible to other people. I
Yeah.
mean, it's pretty simple, but if you're not horrible to other people, then you normally work in a team. Um, and in terms of specific hard skills, it really depends on the role. If you want to be an artist, you've got to show that you can make assets. If you want to be a designer, you've got to show that you can do design.
Hmm.
So it's hard skills are really about demonstrating your skills in your portfolio. Um, the last thing that's important to recruiters, and especially if you're being interviewed by the company themselves rather than
Hmm.
like a recruiting firm, is that you've read about the company and you know what
Yeah.
they're doing. We've had people come into interviews and say, "Oh, so what game are you making?" And it's sort of like it would take 2 minutes for you to search our company's name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so it's really about it comes back to the enthusiasm. If they're excited to work for your company, they will have read something about your company somewhere at some point. Um, and so it's really about showing enthusiasm, showing that you are willing to learn and that you have the ability to learn new stuff through your portfolio.
That's awesome.
Um,
Can I just stop you there? I want to ask in
mhm.
more detail about the application. When you look at an
Yeah.
application, maybe there are people out there who are thinking in terms of a CV or an art portfolio. What are the
Mhm.
things that wow you, that make you go, oh, this person, I might interview them, this work
Yeah.
is good to look at,
Yeah. Um, So most of our hiring process have been artists, so it's easiest for me to talk about that first. And
Go for
artists, if
it.
it comes down to the portfolio,
Mhm.
and it's not just about having really beautiful art; it's about how do you present it. If you've got a website that's your portfolio website and it's really slow and it means that it's really annoying to look at, that's gonna
It's going to affect it. Yeah.
leave. It's gonna affect your chances.
Yeah.
But I think the main thing is, what stands out is has someone done the research on us?
Mhm.
Because as a small studio, it's flattering to have someone want to work for me and want to work for us and want to work on our project. Um, and that sort of level of enthusiasm, I know that they've probably done that research for all the companies that they're applying to.
Mhm.
But the fact that they're willing to go and do that research is very important.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of any specific thing on a CV that stands out, it's just about being professional and
Mhm.
showing that you can work in a professional way. Because a lot of people getting in the games industry at this level are straight out of university,
Mhm.
and whilst you think that everything you're doing is very professional, it's just important about showing that you can work diligently and
Mhm.
work in a proper manner.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of problems coming out of university is that you have this sort of grinding um, work ethic, whereas working in a team in a company like this, it's much more about being consistent and making sure that everyone's communicating well and things
Mhm.
like that. And so it comes down to a lot of sort of diligence and self management.
Yeah. No, that's a great tip. I think communication, what you said, the
Hmm.
last bit of information that you mentioned there is actually very important.
Yeah,
Being able to communicate, and instead of putting in 24 hours in 1 week, but then the rest of the
yeah,
days is empty, and instead you actually do work every single day,
yeah,
is really crucial when you want to sustain, right? When you have the studio rolling and producing work over time, so people don't get burnt out and such.
yeah.
Uh,
Uh,
yeah, go on.
well, I was just going to expand on the point of communication.
Yeah,
If you're looking to not apply, but to start your own small team, the thing I'd suggest you do is have a daily meeting. If you have a daily meeting in the morning, we have a stand in the morning every morning. It keeps communication open, especially if you're a new team. You're not going to have office space. You're not going to be able
yeah,
to rent office space. You're going to be
yeah.
remote working. And so having that point of communication, having regular meetings means that you keep communication flowing and you make sure that everyone knows what each other are doing.
Mhm.
And it's really important to make sure that you don't start overlapping work and work efficiently and stuff like that. So communication is super, super key.
I absolutely agree,
Yeah.
100%. Um, could you expand on Elevate that you've done in
Yeah.
2020? You mentioned
Yeah.
it, but you didn't go into detail. I'm quite curious uh,
Yeah, so
how that helped to
it
boost you
was
forward, you know?
3.5 months
Mhm,
of regular talks and meetings. Um, and the talks are really interesting. And they sort of taught us a lot about how to form companies better, how to do more ethical work environments and stuff like that, which is really interesting and useful as we, are looking to expand.
mhm.
But the key thing for us was that it introduced us to a lot of really good mentors.
I see.
And it's something that people always say you need to find good mentors, but it's sometimes very hard to find good mentors. And so doing projects like this, like Transfuser, um, are really good ways to introduce you to publishers and other game designers and experienced people in the industry that you might not be trying to pitch to. You might not trying to get anything from them other than just their knowledge.
Mhm,
Um, in terms of what we actually did by week, it was more of a structure. So similar to Kickstarter, where similar to Transfuser,
yeah.
where they aren't asking you to make anything for Transfuser. They're not asking you to produce content for them. You're making a game to be shown as part of Transfuser. Elevate was asking us to set milestones, show that we could hit milestones, show that we could do stuff like that. But the big difference with that is because it was a small project, they actually gave us like monthly funding. So it was
Mhm,
the first time that some of us were, getting a wage for working on the
yeah.
game, and that was quite exciting. Um, but yeah, that's sort of what Elevate was. But the key thing with Elevate was the fact that it was supporting diverse teams, and
Mhm,
that was really exciting to see lots of people that are often marginalized, even in the
mhm.
games industry, which is probably one of the most diverse industries in the world,
For sure.
still
Yeah.
still getting supported and propped up, which
Mhm.
is really really fun.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, I think the best thing must have been that feeling of actually getting paid as you're working on a project, because it feels
Yeah,
like a job. It feels like, okay, I'm actually, this has value. You know, what I'm producing
yeah,
is a real thing.
definitely.
You know, I'm actually putting it work, and it's being you're getting stuff out of it, which helps you
Mhm.
to sustain yourself, which is actually quite amazing. Um, a few last things before we finish
Mhm.
off.
Yeah,
I would say we got like 5 more minutes. If you could sort of go back in time, looking back at Transfuser with all the experience you got now, now that you went on to funding the game further, working
yeah.
on it further, and looking to publish, any advice you would give to like your younger self and your team? Let's say you go back to Transfuser,
Mhm.
you are there, maybe you guys have a stand, and you get to talk to your team. What do you tell them?
Um, uh, well, it's an interesting question because there's an argument to be made that if I changed anything back then, I wouldn't be where I am now. But I think the key thing would be um, think hard about how long things actually take,
Mhm,
um, because we like to schedule ourselves in lots of time to do stuff and like to, or not schedule ourselves lots of time, schedule ourselves not enough time to do things and think, well, we'll get it done in that time anyway.
yeah.
Um, Whereas actually, it's really important to think long term about, okay, can I actually get this done in a month or 2 months, or do I
Mhm,
need to 3 months, or can I do it in a week? Um, and then the second thing would be to make a smaller game. Um, but I think, yeah, I don't know what I would say other than just stay diligent, because there are lots of times during sort of indie game development and being self-employed that you can feel down, you think, oh, it's not
mhm.
going anywhere, but you need to just stay diligent and keep working at it. um, and so I'll just try and make my younger self continue their diligence.
So long story short,
Yeah,
just a pep talk.
yeah, just a pep talk,
Just a pep
exactly.
talk. Yeah, just
Yeah,
stick with it, and
stick with it.
you'll get there, right.
Yeah,
Um, not sure what else we can get. I mean, I really appreciate, Tom, all the detail you gave us. Like, it's
no
it's
worries.
actually, I'm sure it's great, and really
No, I'm
uh,
happy. Happy to help.
really, yeah, it's just great information to get. I feel like, as someone who's trying to go into the industry, um, in terms of managing your team,
Hmm.
um, I'm just curious about the team structure.
Hmm.
Did you guys end up getting any contractors? Did the team structure change over time? Any tips for maybe managing teams?
Yeah,
Because it's a huge thing as well, right? You're
hmm,
trying to start a small studio. You
yeah.
have your team. You guys might get along, and you want to make it. So maybe you could touch on that a bit.
Yeah, I can quickly touch on that. So I think the key thing, like I said, is communication
Uh-huh.
in terms of management. In terms of team structure, I think it's important that everyone feels part of the team,
Yeah,
even when we've had contract workers where working at various points. We never wanted to just send them a list of things to do and then them send it back,
yeah.
because you don't get the best work out of people that way. You get the best work if they feel part of the team.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, we didn't have the money to make them full time employees, because we would have loved to. But I think it's important that even people that are kind of passing through, they're all passionate about games, and so making sure they feel part of the project is really important. And I think the last thing is think about what's important to your game. If your game has a beautiful world that needs to have really amazing assets, then put your time and money into finding good artists.
Hmm.
If your game is all about really complex numeric design and systems, then maybe get a second programmer. If your team's only got one programmer, maybe think
Yeah.
about, okay, where do we want to put our money? Where do we want to put our time? And that comes back to the knowing what makes your game good and fun and
Hmm.
makes it different, that we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah, sounds good. That's great. I think we're
Awesome.
gonna finish up here. This might be our time.
Excellent.
So
Yep.
in the chat, guys, you can type exclamation mark Antler Studios, which I'm gonna do again, just in case. There you go, and you have the Antler Studios, their Discord link, and their Twitter handle as well. So make sure you give these guys a follow. And yeah, I mean, it was amazing to chat to you, Tom. A lot of really great insight in terms of team structuring, sort of your journey through
Mhm.
it, and you saying how you should just stay diligent and stick with it, because
Yeah.
you're a great example of an underdog going through Transfuser, not getting it,
Yeah.
but continuing
Yeah.
with Kickstarter, taking things seriously, and
Mhm.
really taking a very professional approach to it, and making it. So it's really great to see that. So thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for the chat.
No,
I
thanks for
hope you
having me.
have absolutely. I hope you have an amazing rest of the afternoon. Good luck
You
with the
too.
project. I'm looking
Thanks a
forward
lot.
to the release, which is when.
Hopefully later this year, but we'll see.
Okay, later this year, hopefully we'll see. That sounds good. I'll take that. Okay, thank you so much. We are gonna take a
Thanks a
short
lot.
break, and after I'm gonna be chatting to Pocket Sized Hands Studio. Okay, take care, guys.